Welcome back to another version, another episode, I should say, of Light Beer, Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble.
I'm Chris Clements, and we are really pleased to have as our guest this morning, because we are recording in the morning, Scot Mussi with the Arizona Free Enterprise Group. Is that the correct?
Free Enterprise Club.
Club.
Yeah.
I always want to say group. I don't know why.
Well, group, club.
Group,
club's more
club.
fun.
Club's more fun.
Sounds more distinguished.
Yes, I always want to say group. But the Free Enterprise Club has distinguished itself as being one of the leading advocates of anti-tax, anti-regulatory policies here in the state. Fiscal reform.
Tax reform.
And this week it had a big victory with some tax reform that passed the legislature finally in answer to another piece of work that they worked on and some anti-208
Right.
efforts. So you guys have been cranking, and just happy to have you here, happy to have you on, and love to hear more about you personally and how you came to do this type of work, and talk a little bit about the legislative session and what you see for the future.
No, Chris, Sean, thanks for having me this morning. The Arizona Free Enterprise Club, we've been here in Arizona since 2005. Founded to be a group out there that was consistently fighting here in the state, at the legislature, even at the local level, for free market, pro-growth, conservative policies, to be an advocate for the taxpayer. When you get involved in the process or see how the sausage is made at the legislature, you'll go down there and you'll see a bunch of people in suits and maybe skirts and dresses, whatever, looking to get things done. And usually what they want to get done is on the behalf of government, is on behalf of special interests. And then you look around and there's nobody there speaking out for the people that can't afford to hire lobbyists, can't afford to be in the game, in the swamp, or whatever you want to call it. And so that's the reason the Free Enterprise Club was formed by a group of like-minded conservatives and free market individuals that wanted to stand up against the machine down there. And so been very active on that. We've built one of the largest grassroots operations in conservative grassroots operations here in Arizona. And then this year, obviously, set out to, address some of the issues what you discussed before about Proposition 208, dealing with the income tax increase, targeting, small business and, successful individuals, wealthy individuals. And on that front, that was, barely passed in November. From our perspective, passed using deceptive tactics to the point what we would call even, the big lie. The other side loves to use the big lie related to elections. We'll use it related to Prop 208 because they went around and said it wasn't going to impact business. It was not even legally possible to tax business through Proposition 208, which was fundamentally
Which means they've never read the tax code.
Yes,
it was pretty much.
And the thing is that, and that's where they've, where the big lie came in is they were sophisticated enough. They knew what the impact was, and they just loved it because they can hide the fact when they had to write the language. So when people saw the language, they didn't realize it would impact small businesses.
And outline for us a little bit, how does it affect businesses? Because a lot of people just don't know. They think they've bought into this lie that it's a tax on the rich, and the rich need to pay more taxes, and so therefore 75% tax increase seems pretty good to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always great when you can tax the other person.
Yeah.
And looking at it, people think, oh, we'll just stick it to Bill Gates or Bezos or some professional athlete that makes millions of dollars. And so when they look at this and they see taxing the wealthy, that's who they envision. Most people don't realize that small businesses, whether they're S corps, LLC, sole proprietorships, individual hardworking people, that they pay all their taxes through the individual tax form. It all flows through from their small business onto their individual form. It's just a creature of our tax code. It's just how we've done it for decades. And unless you've operated any of those types of entities, you wouldn't know that. And so they took advantage of that. The left, the unions, the out-of-state groups that spent millions of dollars pushing this thing wanted to hide that fact. And so this initiative passed. We had Prop 208, and all of a sudden now Arizona was saddled with the 9th highest small business income tax rate in the country. second highest in the Southwest, next to California. And
Wow.
we looked a lot more like, after the Prop 208 passed, we looked a lot more like California than we did Nevada, Utah, Colorado, even New Mexico. Nobody had a higher rate than us except for California, and made us completely uncompetitive in that space. We were already, after it passed, saw small businesses announcing that they were going to leave and reorganize somewhere else, and it was going to be a drag. I think everybody agreed it was going to be a drag, but the people pushing it didn't care. This was about sticking to the rich, and it's what they wanted.
Well, it's about education, right?
Well, the claim it's about education. It's
Yeah.
about union power, because
Yeah.
the other part of the big lie was that this really wasn't money that's going into the classroom. This was to support just bigger administration, it is administrative budgets and spending on the administration level. So what? Tell us about what happened in remedying this problem.
Yeah, before the session began, our organization, strategized on what to do and set forth and put goals this session on how to address Proposition 208. And our goal was to do everything we can to mitigate and undo the damage. First off, dealing with the surcharge that was in Prop 208, it was 3.5%. Figuring out a way to mitigate that and bring that top rate back down from 8%, which was the 9th highest in the country, back down to 4.5%. We also set out a goal to say we need to also pass the largest tax cut in Arizona history, and do it in a way that benefits all taxpayers and helps small business. Small business were pummeled the most by the COVID shutdowns. It was big business, corporations. They all got to stay open while small businesses were shut down. And so we wanted to pass a big tax cut. We set a marker of at least $1 billion. We wanted a bigger tax cut than what was included in Prop 208, and make sure that small businesses would be one of the primary beneficiaries. And so laid that out, worked with the lawmakers down there on how that can be done, how it can be fit within the budget, do it in a way that's responsible, that isn't going to just completely, result in cuts or an imbalanced budget in a couple of years. And what was approved last week and signed into law yesterday by the governor accomplished those goals. We passed the largest tax cut in Arizona history. When fully implemented over the next 3 years, will be nearly $2 billion in ongoing tax cuts. Included in that was what we called the aggregate tax cap, to ensure that we brought that top rate down. So under the plan, no taxpayer, no matter who they are, will pay more than 4.5% of their income to the state of Arizona. That is the rate that was in place pre-208, and that'll be the rate going forward. Nobody pays more than that. Coupled with that, to make sure all taxpayers benefit, is we also bring all the other rates down into what's being called the flat tax, even though technically it's a two bracket plan.
Right, yeah.
Us tax wonks look at this and they keep running on flat tax. I'm like, that's not flat tax. But they've been calling it the flat tax, setting the rate at 2.5%. And so under that, we're going to have, when fully implemented, a single rate of 2.5% for all taxpayers. And then high earners, if you hit that 208 surcharge threshold, you'll be basically capped at 4.5% when fully implemented.
That's awesome. That's the 2.5% is so this is not only something that you've been deeply involved in for years, but this is the culmination of Governor Ducey's desire to get the income tax rate as close to zero as possible. This is as close as we've gotten to zero in I don't know how many years, probably since we've had a state income tax, right?
Yes, I mean, this is, Governor Ducey campaigned on it. We were pleased that he set the marker out beginning of session on being aggressive and bold on this issue, and also provided the flexibility for, lawmakers and other people that analyze and have been working on this issue to be able to provide input on crafting a, tax plan that worked. And so appreciate his support that he led on it. And when you talk about historically, this is historically low since before we had an income tax. In the 70s, our top rate was over 8%. Wow. Symington started working and chipping it away, got it down under 6%, and over the last 20 years, got down to 4.5%, which made us competitive with the region. When you look at 4.5%, Utah's just under 5%, Colorado's just under 4.5%. Nevada doesn't even have an income tax. Texas doesn't have an income tax. And so that kept us at least competitive. Obviously, if we can get rid of the income tax, that's great. But bare minimum should be is we should be comparable to our competitor states. 208 threw us completely out of whack. And so this package, it fixed that problem. We're now once again going to be at least competitive with our neighboring states. And, with that 2.5 single rate for everybody else, set up a position where we can realistically look at saying eliminating the income tax is possible.
Yeah. What will there be an effort to try to refer this to the ballot?
There's a lot of chatter about that from the
You mean
the
to
other side.
overturn it?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so if a
The
law
same
passes,
interests from Oregon that spearheaded
Well,
208
California.
and California coming back and trying
they
to
can collect a certain number of signatures to then refer the law to the ballot for validation, I guess.
Yes, under Arizona's constitution, you can refer any measure passed by the legislature except for budget bills. Those are non-referable. Anything else you can refer to the ballot if you collect enough signatures to qualify. And so they're talking about it. I think they're upset. I think it's a lot of anger on them wanting to do it. Obviously, if you have enough money, and these out-of-state groups spent over $20 million to put 208 on the ballot and to get it passed. If they have money, they could potentially do it. I think it's going to be far more difficult and problematic than they think it will be for two reasons. One, for as much as they want to talk about the tax package and what they want to refer, it was actually broken up into a couple different pieces, into different bills. And so if they're wanting to do a referral, they're going to have to refer multiple bills, carry multiple clipboards, and collect a lot more signatures than they think they're going to have to collect.
and that was strategic.
Well, it just works out that way. I mean,
Come on.
Secondly,
Giving people too much credit.
yeah, it was an accident.
Nothing is quite an accident, I don't think, especially in politics.
Another thing is part of that too is that one of the components of the tax package, that max aggregate cap that I was talking about at 4.5% to deal with Proposition 208, that was put into a separate bill. That not just was it a separate bill, but it was in a revenue budget bill. And so from our perspective is non-referable. It's the rest of the tax package, the flat tax, all those things that are in there that they want to be looking to refer. And they keep talking about how this was a giveaway to the rich. Well, if you take just that tax bill and refer that to the ballot, that actually is a good broad-based tax cut package that benefits everybody, not just on not just on income taxes. It includes a property tax cut. It includes tax relief for businesses by lowering their business class assessment ratios. It even includes language in there to expand what people can do for charitable deductions and what they can deduct on their tax codes. And so if you're looking to say, well, we want to refer this because we don't like bringing our rate down to 2.5, you're also going to be referring all of those other elements to it as well. And they won't just be talking about a 2.5 flat tax class warfare deal. They're going to be talking about how they are opposed to a homeowners property tax cut, how they're opposed to increasing the charitable deduction, how they're opposed to reducing commercial property taxes. They'll be biting off more than they can chew, and so I think that'll be a problem. And then I think the other problem they'll have is this is a difficult environment to do any sort of petition gathering right now on a constrained time frame and how much it costs. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but it's really hard to get people to work right now because we're paying people not to work with everything that's going on. I'm driving around and I see signs, with certain fast food places offering $18-19 an hour to get people to work. Some places can't even offer full hours, and so if they're going to try to refer something, they're going to have to figure out a way to get people off the couch and get them here to collect signatures. I think that's going to be a lot more difficult than they think. Between that and just the fact that it's 120 degrees outside and everything else, there's a lot of problems they're going to run into in trying to do a referral. We'll see if they do. I mean, obviously, it's up to them if they want to. We think it'd be a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, it'll be challenging. It's not a great environment politically to try to roll back something like this. I mean, I think the Democrats nationally have created a lot of problems for the progressive side of the aisle in trying to get stuff done because their overreach is just insane.
Yeah, well, even on a national level, I mean, the idea of raising taxes is not going over very well in in the Congress, and they keep saying that they're going to push these bills through, but I can do math, and I don't see the numbers of doing that.
No.
So, but the question I had for you is, I mean, this is monumental what just happened. We've been talking about something like this for several years. But in the advent of 208, like where did we fall short in defeating it? Like what happened? What could we have done differently? Because something like this will come down the pike again. And so what do we need to be prepared for?
I think, in a couple different things that they did, I think one of them we talked about before about how they were, deceptive on how they passed it. I think if they tried to come back and do the same thing again, it'd be much more difficult, largely because of how we restructured our tax code. They would have to refer something that would look completely different now. It couldn't just be we're going to do a surcharge and we'll stick that on the ballot. It wouldn't work. They would have to go in and start tinkering with the rest of the tax code, and they would have to raise taxes on other people than just the wealthy. Secondly, part of the package that was just passed dealing with this small business issue is one of the bills creates a separate alternate tax code for small business if they want to opt in and use that. And one of the benefits of doing it that way is it ends the scam that they were trying to run, which is we're just going to soak it to the rich and we're going to tax the wealthy. Small businesses now will be able to opt out of that system if they want to.
Sure.
And so if they're looking to, quote, soak the rich, they won't be able to also soak it to small business either, which means that anything they do as far as a tax increase would generate substantially less revenue, which from their perspective won't be what they really want to do. Plus, from ours, if they try to go after small business, then we can really have that argument and that debate, and they won't be able to hide it anymore. So I think in those respects, it'll be harder for them to do it. As far as what happened last time, I mean, we can look back and relitigate the campaign. I think we were really active on the grassroots side, running the social media campaign on it. We would have hoped that other elements of the campaign would have been more aggressive on hitting that small business message early on. They weren't, and so I think there were some elements there of that. But I think that given what we've done and the steps we've taken post 208, it'll be very difficult for them to try to go back to the ballot and do what they just did again.
I thought what you just described on the business tax, the carve out, so that businesses can opt out of any sort of increase, was really inventive, and really, I don't know if we've seen that in other states.
Inventive is not how the media has been describing it.
Well, the media is, the media, especially every morning we have Channel 12 on for some reason, and they've just been hammering at this. But from just a tax planning standpoint for a business, for a small business, an LLC, a subchapter S, to be able to do something like that, where did that come from? I mean, and also, is that active in any other states?
The idea culminated. Senator Javen Mesnard is the one that ran the bill on this, and and the idea was built around the premise that right now, again, all that small business S corp LLC income flows onto your tax form, and that's just a creature of our tax code. And what precludes us from saying let's just categorize that as an alternate, tax and form and apply the same kind of standard, deductions, exemptions that we would have that would flow in other tax forms that we have under our C corp for publicly traded companies.
Sure.
Might do the same model, and you take a look at it. There's no reason that it can't be done that way, and that's why it worked. And so, and again, one of the best things about this is it was revealing on what the misunderstanding or the lack of understanding from even people in the media on this, and also fleshed out where a lot of the people on the backers of this, how they feel and stand on this, because they kept wanting to talk about the wealthy and what this was about, and they would have to explain why they wanted to still tax small business. To the point, though, that the argument that they were making at the end was, this really doesn't help small business, and this really isn't, taxing small business, because the only revenue that's getting taxed is the revenue after you pay all your employees, all your expenses, and everything else. It's just the profits that are getting taxed. And that's not really from the small business. That's individual benefits. So Just so you know, all the small businesses that operate out there, they don't actually operate to turn a profit or to do something. It's not really what the small business is doing. They actually just operate to pay employees and
Right.
expenses and stuff. And
They're just there to provide a public service.
yeah, I sometimes wonder. I mean,
At no profit margin.
these these
Crazy.
type of theoretical arguments sound great, in a think tank or maybe in the halls of the Capitol building, but out in the real world, that's just nonsensical. You talk to any small business owner, they don't exist just to pay employees. They exist to make a profit, and that's from their small business. And so, very revealing. And then just other states looking at this. Actually, there's been a movement to start looking at doing more of this and bifurcating this out of the tax code. Ironically, for a different reason than what was done here in Arizona under Prop 208. It deals with the federal tax reforms that happened a couple of years ago. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, passed under President Trump, good tax reform, brought down our corporate rates, brought down our taxes on small businesses and LLCs, also included the elimination of the state and local tax deduction, a cap on it, which really hammered states, high tax states, generally Democrat blue states. In response to that, some states have been looking to set up an alternative small business tax code to allow their taxpayers to stay in the state and take advantage of an alternative tax that then would be able to sidestep the SALT limitations and the impacts that would have on their ability to mitigate their tax burden. So
Interesting.
You're seeing some blue states, Connecticut, New York, and others that have been exploring similar models to what we just did here in Arizona, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
Overall, I think long term, we think it's actually a decent reform, because if we can separate individual versus what's business income, we can have it's harder to, again, play these types of shell games and deceptions with the public.
Right. How did you get into this? How did you end up at Free Enterprise Club, and what's been your motivation?
Started working at the club 8 years ago. First kind of found out about them, in my prior work, doing work in the home building industry. I was doing some political work there, and got to know them working on different tax policy and regulatory issues. And for me, that's always been kind of where my passion and my interest in politics were, and what an area that I really wanted to work on. And I philosophically, when I learned about the club, didn't even know groups like this existed, realized right away this is exactly where my mindset was and what I thought was good for the state. I'm an Arizona native. I've lived here my whole life. Love my state. And the beliefs and principles that the club had were things that I gravitated towards. And so decided I left the home building industry, decided I wanted to kind of work in this space, started doing work with the club, and was blessed that some of the supporters of the club chose me to be to end up running it, and started running it back in 2013, was named president of the club in 2014, and I've been I guess the rest is history. Been doing it for the last several years, and it's been an interesting path. Learning kind of just the different aspects of the state, how learning different people, and doing setting out a course to do what we can to make Arizona just a free and prosperous place to live. I mean, I think there's just something rugged and beautiful about this state, and I want to keep it that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's probably pretty rare you have three people sitting in a room that are all native Arizonans.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. We're unicorns. We're absolutely unicorns. Everyone's always from somewhere else.
Yeah,
and that's
but it's fine.
Kind of
We
the
welcome them
message
to
of,
come, pay their taxes, help the economy. Just don't bring the politics of bad things.
Yeah, just don't California our Arizona.
Right.
Yeah, Californicate our Arizona. And that's where I was going with this next question, is that how do we, as free enterprise people, and part of our mantra here is faith, freedom, free enterprise, like how do we communicate to the people who are coming here in a much more dramatic way? Hey, we understand you're leaving California. We understand you're leaving Illinois. We understand what's happening there. But here we have this concept of freedom, this concept of free enterprise. Leave your politics. Remember why you left. How do we do a better job with that?
I think some of that is obviously the type of the leaders we get in the state. A lot of our, even on the elected leader side, a lot of times they have the largest megaphone, and so they can set the tone in a large degree on that, and set even the tone on the types of debates that we're having. But long term and big picture, I think that the concept that politics is downstream of culture is 100% the truth. And if you're ever going to be able to convince people or change minds, and I believe you can't just say we're going to go win an election. It can't be winning elections. It can't be let's go take a poll. You have to change polls, and you have to change trajectories, and you do that by I think influencing kind of the cultural mindset. And while there's some natural overlap in what you see in different states, every state has the opportunity to set their own tone and culture on what they're doing, and it starts at the local level, I believe, and kind of works it, and it bubbles up from there. And so as people are coming in, if they can see that the culture and the mindset in Arizona is what we believe is what's great for the community, great for the state, great for everybody, it'll help with that and keep that tone. And so, and then it flows from there, and then the type of policies you set up will continue to perpetuate that. I mean, it's you set policies up that encourage and empower certain groups that we don't philosophically align with. It'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and they'll continue to infiltrate and grow. And conversely, if we do the opposite will occur. And and you can't also think that everything is just static. You think about where we were 20 years ago and what an electoral college map looked compared to what it was today, compared to what it was in 1980, compared to what it was. I would say that you can't just act that everything is static. Things are dynamic. You have to look at things as something that's completely evolving, and make sure again that you're not ceding ground, and you're out there, putting your message out every day.
And that's an important part of it. It's just making sure that you're getting the message out, because people generally don't pay that much attention. So you have to figure out ways to get them to pay attention. What would be your advice to someone kind of up and coming in how to get involved in politics or in policy, or what's some of the things that you've seen in your own life, but also in others, of good ways for people to kind of break into this?
I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask for that, because for me it was kind of a complete accident that I even got into politics. I didn't know anybody in the political world when I was in college. Knew that I liked politics. I was actually majoring in political science, but it wasn't because I ever envisioned that I would be day to day kind of working in that environment. And so for me, it was I got introduced to someone in politics from a professor who did some law at Arizona State University. I mean, that's how I got involved. It was a complete accident, but was instructive to me that most things in life, it's not about a lot of times about your resume, about the contacts and the connections that you make. And politics is a very social environment. In fact, everything that we talk about, it ends up becoming has some sort of social construct to it. And so if I was going to advise anybody, it'd be you have to get out and make friends and talk to people and get involved, whether it be basic things, whether it be at the school board level or whatever things you're doing. You'll be surprised how small the world is. Yeah. And everything comes back together, and so-and-so knows so-and-so who knows so-and-so that, oh, by the way, they're looking to do something. Or you just get involved in something like that. It works, and you get more involved at that level. Maybe you run for the school board. Next thing you know, you're doing something else if you want to work on that side of it. And so, my advice always is just, make sure you develop a good social network. Get out and meet people. Don't sit behind your computer.
Yeah, that's great advice. Because really, if there's anything that, it was obviously, even before COVID, the advent of social media and the isolation of people, and then COVID happens. It's even worse now. And it's funny because I think people sit behind their computer, they're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, they think that they're socializing, but they're really not, because you say things online that you would never say to somebody face to face, I think. And it just, the personal interaction, I think, is super important to developing relationships and understanding how people think and their work ethic and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it's one thing if you want to go out there and do that. If you want to be a TikTok star, I guess you can go be a TikTok star. To each his own. I'm not I'm not into the influencer world. I'll let other people be experts on that.
So what you're saying is that you're not, the Free Enterprise Club is not on TikTok very much.
Well, Scot Mussi is not on TikTok. I do not have an Instagram. That's not none of those things. I have a Facebook account, and obviously those elements, in all seriousness, all those elements are important. You have to be engaging on those mediums because, again, that's where a lot of the culture is at. You have to be involved. And so, our organization and others make sure that they're engaging on those fields. At the same time, personally, that's not my jam.
And yet, I mean, there's your staff. It's you. There's like 2 other people.
We have 5 people.
5 people now. You should just be 2.
When I first joined the club, it was just one person on staff. It was me.
It was you.
Yes.
So I mean, that's been a tremendous success over the last. I mean, since 2000, you said 13. Mm-hmm. I mean, what you've built from really grassroots, and yeah, some of the most prominent Arizonans are on that board, and have this vision, and now, I mean, the consequential work that you're doing is really amazing. Do you ever just kind of look around and go, how did this happen?
Sometimes. It's interesting, and anybody that's kind of did this, been in this line of work. Sean's been doing this for a long, long time. It is, especially at the state level. Most of the action's at the federal level. Most people, that's where a lot of the attention is. That's where most people kind of look to when they're discussing this. State level politics, capital politics. It's a little bit tougher to get. Historically, has been ideological, philosophical people that share our values to get them involved. The good news is that's changed a lot in the last couple of years. A lot more people have realized how important state and local politics are, and they're getting more engaged, and has helped with our growth as an organization. Because these types of, we're not affiliated with any other group. Arizona Free Enterprise Club is an independent. We're focused on state and local issues, and so. For us to people to support our organization, they need to be, wanting to, that needs to be where their mind is at. And it's been a lot of hard work, and we're very proud of what we've been able to build here. I look around to their states, other ones that have similar models. Some states have things that are similar to the club, but usually they're in states like Texas or Florida, huge, states that are 4 or 5 times our size. So you look around, you don't find a lot of other free enterprise clubs in other states.
Yeah. It's been a unique success for Arizona. I think that you guys have led some really important reforms in Arizona. Obviously, this tax reform that just was signed yesterday, leading among the top of the successes that you can cite. What do you, when you look at where things are going in Arizona and maybe nationally, but particularly in Arizona, what kind of things do you see over the horizon as far as issues that we're going to face as a state?
I think the next battleground that we're going to see is and it's always been an issue, but I think the landscape has changed. I think COVID has accelerated this. Has been the relationship of taxpayers and parents with their K-12 system. There's always been this fight over what we do, the future of education, what model is best. We've always believed we want to empower parents and kids the most, and it's why we believe money should be tied to students, not systems. But a lot of that debate happens a lot of times in more of a theoretical environment. It's not real world. Most people have went to a public school. It's kind of what they know. Most people have historically wanted to be deferential to their district schools. And I think all that's changed. COVID had a huge impact on that. I think a lot of parents saw firsthand what was going on in their schools, were frustrated by teachers, frankly, declaring themselves non-essential employees and not going to work while everybody else was going back to work. It was very confusing to people. I think people were frustrated that they wouldn't get a paycheck if they just sat at home, but it appears that some people that have guaranteed paychecks don't think they need to go to work anymore. And so I think that element's changed things quite a bit. And then you throw in really kind of this exposure on the type of curriculum that's being taught in our schools. There's always been instances where it's gotten flagged where kind of schools have gotten out of line with what they've been teaching in their curriculum, but it's never been to the point where it is now, where parents firsthand are seeing what's happening. I think now what we're seeing with critical race theory and these other radical ideologies that are just getting rammed down the throats of these parents, and they're seeing it firsthand. These districts are adopting it whole cloth on these types of things. That is where the next battleground is going to be, and what the future looks like, and how do we address it? Can it be addressed with trying to fix K-12? Is that what the public eventually is going to go with, or is it going to be in a direction where they decide, it's time that we move to a different model and say, look, we'll just find schools that we feel comfortable and we want to work with.
Right.
Heck, even just looking at the numbers, there's already been a decline in K-12 enrollment. They're still looking for the quote missing kids that they don't know where they're at. I'll let you know a secret, they're not missing. Right. Most of those kids are at home with their parents and they're being homeschooled, which is another element of this. Homeschooling's gone through the roof. It's been one of the most destabilizing things in that respect in a generation, for our K-12 system and for our education system. And to me is where one of the big battle lines are going to be drawn over the next 10 years. I really think that this last couple of years where we saw the Red for Ed, Prop 2 and everything, I think that was the high watermark for K-12 on what they've been trying to do. Honestly, they've seen the writing on the wall, whether it be with charter schools and everything else, that they're every year they're losing enrollment, they're losing everything else. I think at this point, everything's going to be just a kind of steady decline on their clout and influence in the political process.
And I agree with you. It's one of the things that has been amazing when people talk about education reform. The education system in Arizona is insanely complex. It's not like when you talk about the money should follow the student, not the system. There's so many different pieces of pots of money that are being pulled from. Is it even possible to untangle all that? How long would that's probably something that's going to take years to unwind, right?
Yeah. There's two elements of it. One is what you're describing, which is with the full school finance system, and then the other element of, well, let's just give money to, assign money, give people, an ESA or some sort of other, whatever you want to call it, a voucher where they can go where they want to go to school. I think you can do the latter without completely having to do the former, but both are important. If you can fix school finance, which some of that has to do with your kid's in school district A, Johnny's in school district B, and just because he happens to be in school district B, he gets $2,000 more per year for that district, for that kid than that one. Well, why is that kid worth $2,000 more than that kid? We believe that funding should be equitable. Every student's worth the same. Obviously, you have special needs kids and others that you do need more resources, but that's a separate issue. Just because you happen to live on one side of the street doesn't mean your kid should get less money than the other. And we should do everything we can to fix those equity issues. But I only think they need to be corrected to a certain extent. We can move to a model where we're directly funding parents and families and kids, and it can be done without having to completely unwind everything in our school, finance model, property taxes, local levies and all that, it's a big hornet's nest, but it can be done. And that's why you do what you need to do on the equity, but at the end of the day, we believe full bore, you have to go in and make sure that we're prioritizing parents and families and not school districts and unions and other people. They're not the priority.
Yeah, they shouldn't be. It's the incentives are all completely backwards because superintendents and districts are, they want to build empires, and so they'll do bonds, they'll do whatever. You see all these positions and buildings and things that are unnecessary when it comes to actually educating kids.
Yeah, and the thing is that there are some good, well-run school districts in Arizona. Some very poor-run ones. Our belief is there's space for both as far as districts and private schools and charters, but just let the successful ones succeed and let the other ones figure something out. You see this where you have a district like Tucson Unified, which is just a rolling disaster. multiple reasons.
Or
And
are you saying that because I'm sitting right here?
Yes.
had to live under the auspices of Tucson Unified School District for some 20 years and went to elementary school at one of the better performing schools.
Yeah.
One of the better performing schools.
It's good that you can read.
Yeah, it's a miracle, really.
But then and again, you look at others. There's other districts that do a pretty good job. But let the ones that succeed get the kids and get the money, and then let it follow the money and do it that way.
Well, that was always the big debate down in Tucson, anyway, and that is, well, we need to spend more money on education, when really you can't. Nobody could explain why a Flowing Wells school district was so high performing in a really relatively poor area of town, and TUSD was such a disaster. And one of the reasons why it was such a disaster and continues to be a disaster is it's too big. There's no way to manage its complexity, what we just talked about. It's just too big. And so one of those reforms, especially for these large districts, has to be the breakup of the districts to make them more accountable and more attuned to parents and students. Because the big districts, that model just doesn't work anymore if you're going to have any sort of public K through 12 education. And then I would argue, Arizona, with the advents of ESAs and charter schools, which have exploded, really have led the way in productive means of educating our kids. I mean, we have some of the highest performing charter schools in the country, consistently in the top 20. And yet, if you talk to the Red for Ed people, they say we don't spend enough on education.
Everything to them. It's a one solution to every problem, which is just
money.
We need more money. And and even what you're describing there, as far as these districts and different ones, the interesting thing is we've allowed for charter schools, we have allowed for these alternative options. It's allowed to an incredible amount of innovation.
But open enrollment too.
Open enrollment
has completely ripped the Band-Aid off of K through 12 in many districts because parents can walk.
It's amazing. I mean, one of the ones that we love to take a look at every year pre-pandemic was the relationship of Phoenix Union to Glendale Union District, where you would have these parents that live in the Phoenix district would go over to Glendale and get in line at Sunny Slope to go to their high school over there. Now that's the district to district and what you're describing, the open enrollment, and they're lining up to do that. Phoenix gets about $2,500 more per pupil in funding than Glendale. So that means you have parents that are willingly taking their kids to another school where they're theoretically getting $2,500 less to educate their child, and they're choosing to make that choice. And this, again, isn't district to charter or district to private. This is district to district. And it's because Glendale's, and Sunny Slope especially, is a better high school, a better functioning district than Phoenix. And
you see that in Tucson too with TUSD and Vail, completely, or even a Flowing Wells.
Yeah, right. And we just think the money should follow them. I mean, Phoenix, Phoenix should not just be able to sit back and just continue to get these types of resources while offering a substandard product that's so bad that parents are forced to set up tents and wait outdoors to see if they can get a slot at Sunny Slope, which is it's
amazing.
That's not a system that is for parents. That's a system that's working against parents.
Yeah, and then you'll have teachers or teachers unions that rip on charter schools like a Basis or like a Great Hearts and say they're not real schools and they shouldn't exist. And yet to your point, people lining up to get their kids in those schools.
All the charters out there right now, by and large, have wait lists trying to, people begging to get their kids into these schools. It is amazing. Again, the post-pandemic world, I don't think that the traditional districts, I don't think that they're ready for what's going to be happening.
Yeah.
Well, and rightfully so, because even during the pandemic and the lockdowns, most of those schools and some faith-based schools as well decide to stay open and do whatever they can to stay open. I mean, here in Phoenix, Bases, Great Hearts Academies, all those different charter schools that exist were open. And they mitigated the best they could with the science or the information and data they had before them. And so you had all these people who were trapped in non-performing K through 12 public schools, looking across the street, going, wait, what?
Yeah.
Right. Why are they open and they have just as many students as we do, and we can't be open? Well, it's because they can't. The teachers are staying home. They're protected by the unions.
Right. Scott, before we lose you today or have you go, talk to us about what other successes you guys had at the legislature this year. Now that we're the session is now over officially.
I'll talk actually a little bit about.
Was this the longest session ever?
Well, I know that we've gone up to the end of the fiscal year before. Back during the Napolitano years, we had a couple of sessions where it went right up to the June 30th deadline on approving a budget. And then there was the infamous year-round session under Jan Brewer, where it wasn't technically year-round. They ended up signing dying, but then they just kept going into special session because
That's right. I remember that.
Governor Brewer at the time really wanted a tax increase, and the legislature was against it, and it went on forever. And but this was one of the longest. It was the longest, at least in a decade, in a little over a decade. So. Long journey, but actually a lot of good successes. A few clunkers. There's always going to be clunkers, but a lot of good successes. One of the more enjoyable things to see was some of the election integrity legislation that we were able to get passed this year. Things that we've been working on for years. I mean, it was kind of interesting to see how everybody wanted to wrap it in that this was just about the 2020 election. There were actually issues that we've flagged for years prior to that on issues that needed to be addressed, whether it be dealing with cleaning up of our voter rolls, making sure that we have some oversight, some transparency. Those are things that we believe are important. They should happen. They should be nonpartisan, and everybody should be supporting it. But it seems that if you want to make sure people, for example, have provide ID when they vote. That's controversial, even though poll after poll shows 80% of people support, providing ID. So, but specifically, we got some language to clean up our voter rolls. Language was included in the budget to provide for the Auditor General of the state of Arizona. They will go in and randomly audit counties and their voter registration rules, go around the state and do that to make sure that they're following the laws. Something that we always like to point out is we actually have passed pretty decent laws when it comes to making sure our voter registration rules are up to date. But there's never been any sort of oversight or checkup, no enforcement of it. You just have to say, we're going to trust the county or the county recorder that they're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. And if they're not, we wouldn't even know. And so now the Auditor General will be able to go in and they actually can do a review and conduct a review of that. And then one other one on the transparency side that we loved is you have these voter registration drives that are always participated in by local, by the counties and going out there and doing that. We noticed a pretty interesting trend in Maricopa County that it seemed that every event that the county was showing up at was an event by some far left Democrat group. And so we took a deeper dive and it found out that they attended around 80 events. All of but like 3 of them were for liberal or leftist causes. And so we put language in there to basically require that all of the counties have to provide that information to the state, to the legislature, and they can catalog it to see if our taxpayer money is being used to actually making sure we're registering voters and it's a nonpartisan, fair process, or is this a system that's been kind of taken over by a few niche groups that are going out there and using it to goose the registration numbers for a certain political party.
Right. That's good. Your point about this is stuff that you've been working on for years is what drives me crazy when people say, well, we can't do election reform until after the Maricopa County audit is done because we don't know what what changes need to be done. Well, we know that the audit's a joke. It's a fiasco. We know what needs to be changed. I mean, you pointed those things out. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out because I think that the Supreme Court today ruled in favor of the legislation that passed a few years ago, which prohibits ballot harvesting and also says if you don't vote in your precinct, your vote doesn't count. Well, imagine that.
That was a pretty transformative ruling. That was
Wait, you mean I can't go across town and go vote? Oh, but
Yeah,
I work over here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you can just hand your ballot off to that random guy that comes to your
Right,
door.
yeah. Who
which
knocks on your door, gives you the ballot, and says, "Here, fill it out this way, and you can give it back to me."
we had video of people going in and just dropping off, boxes full of ballots the day of, and with no idea whether they came from them, how they acquired those ballots, just dropping them off. That's not a system that inspires confidence, and that's something that when we talk about the elections here in Arizona, and one of the concerns that we've always had was what we saw in 2020, and the I think some of the people that have grown extremely suspicious about our elections is we kind of saw that as that was always the ultimate result of the system that we kind of has set up, and that we needed to put stuff in place, safeguards in place, to make sure that whenever that we had a system that people can trust and have faith in. Our biggest fear is only a matter of time that we're going to have a close election, and one way or another, it could have been the Republicans or the Democrats. I mean, people want to make it sound like Donald Trump was the first to ever say that election was stolen and it was election fraud. Somebody should page Stacey Abrams down in Georgia, and
Who never? She's the governor because she never conceded. As you know.
She never conceded, and as everybody knows, it wasn't Trump that won in 2016. It was Russia, and it was all heck.
Madame Lafarge is still
is
still crowing on that.
We went up and that took up almost 3 years of our time dealing with all that, to the point where people thought that it was almost in the bag, that there was collusion. And so this idea that this was anything new, it's not. But we just need a system that people can have faith in and believe in. And our hope is there's still some things that we need to get done. I think we still have a lot of work to do on our voter ID laws here in Arizona, but by and large, I think we made a lot of good improvements, and we'll see what comes out of the audit. I mean, we'll see if they uncover anything, and then waiting until after the audit was done. We never believed in that because we already knew, as you mentioned, Sean, that there's reforms and fixes that needed to happen.
Yeah. I think that I have said on occasion, look, we'll make voting as easy as humanly possible. In Arizona, it's very easy to vote here. I mean, it's way easier in Arizona than it is in other states as far as accessibility and just the broad, because we have early voting and sign up for people or whatever it's going to be called down, automatically get your ballot sent to you. I am for everyone having the easiest way possible to vote as long as we have ID. I mean, that is the one thing that I think is the ultimate safeguard. I mean, you have to have ID for everything you do in society. Why not vote? It's one of the more important things, of the more important civic duties that we have. It just seems crazy. So I would be, I'm not so certain I'd just send a ballot to everybody. I think they ought to actually ask for it. But even then, as long as they have ID, let's vote it back. Yeah. So I think your ID point is one that and like you said, nationally, it's plus 80% of people, because it just inherently makes sense that you want to know that the person who says that they're voting this ballot is the person that's voting this ballot.
Well, but the other point is it protects your vote.
Yeah.
Right? You're verifying that you're the person that's voting, and you don't want anybody else saying that they're you and voting for whatever reason. I mean, and that's really the concern.
Yeah.
And that's why, I mean, if you are going to have a system where you are mailing ballots to people, there has to be an ID component. This idea that it's just a signature verification check, is, in many respects, is a little absurd. Handwriting changes. You're either going to have a system in place that's going to be so restrictive on the verification that it's going to be invalidating tons of ballots because, again, signatures are subjective, or you're going to have such loose standards that you're going to let stuff through. You're going to have to. You're talking about hundreds of thousands, millions of ballots coming in that way, and so it makes sense to have some sort of ID component. Every time you do business with your bank or other things, they're always giving you some sort of unique verification code to make sure, and it's a objective number or whatever that code is, whatever the password is, to make sure you are who you say you are. There's no reason we shouldn't have some sort of objective identification standard when you vote by mail. It just makes sense.
Agreed.
Yeah, and we're one of the states that has a very, very robust vote by mail system that's worked relatively well for a long time.
Yeah.
So however we can improve that and to protect the integrity of the vote, protect your right to vote, that's a good thing.
Totally agree.
Cool. Well, Scott, thank you so much for taking
Yeah,
the time.
we could keep going, but we're running out of time.
Well, we'll definitely have you back, because I think there's, obviously
what are we
there's
going to do next
session,
year?
and then we'll be dealing with ballot initiatives and those kind of things. So we're going to have plenty to talk about in the future.
So, and for people who are listening, where can they find you?
Yeah, if you want to learn more about our organization, you can visit our website at www.azfree.org. You can look us up there and learn a little more about our organization. If you want to ever get involved, you can join our grassroots, our grassroots team. We call them our club enforcers. You can sign up there, and through that, if you want to join our network, and you can attend events. Also, help us out at the legislature. We're always looking for people to sign in on bills, to contact their lawmakers, and we've tried to set up a process and system that makes it as easy as possible for anybody to get involved. We call it the armchair advocacy, and so we want to make it so that even if you're sitting on your couch at home, that you can bug your lawmaker if they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, awesome. I just want to make a comment that a lot of the grassroots technologies that you've put in place have been really dramatic, because I think back in the day, people looked at Free Enterprise Club as, it's that tax group, whatever they are, and now I think there's a lot of people in the legislature that really pay attention to when you guys are on something, and they don't want to get in your crosshairs, because they know they could lose support almost instantly.
It helps when you have an engaged citizen group that's wanting to do that. It makes a big difference, and we tell all of our supporters and activists that they're really the engine that makes it go, because you can go down and talk to lawmakers, you can go down and tell them that something's a good idea or a bad idea, but when they're hearing from real people in their district, that has an impact. Big impact.
All politics is local.
Yeah. Well, keep up the good work, Scott. We love what you're doing.
Thanks so much.
Yep. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks
Great.
for being here.
Thanks, everybody. See you.